Okay, good. It's a little bit after 6 o'clock. Welcome to the January 5th, 2015 meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Before we start with the reading of the agenda, I wanted to address one issue that has come up, which is one of the members of the board has claimed that the posting for this meeting was done improperly, and as a result has declined to attend tonight's meeting, and we've asked the town clerk to attend tonight. Posting is done by the town clerk, and the town clerk is the party responsible for certifying whether posting has been proper. So if I could ask you just to address that question, if you would, Carol.
I'm happy to answer that, Mr. Chairman. The posting for this meeting, as for almost every other meeting that's ever posted, has met all statutory and all regulatory requirements as determined by the Attorney General's Division of Open Government meeting.
Okay, thank you. And based on that, I'm comfortable proceeding. Selectman Crusoe?
Yeah, no, I am. I just ask that we defer any votes tonight. Just that's been typically the policy or practice of the board when one member's not here for whatever reason.
Yeah.
If we could just, but still have our discussions and whatnot and defer voting unless something's really critical.
I'm not sure if there's anything critical we need to vote on tonight. But,
yeah.
Okay, and then I'll ask the town administrator to read the agenda. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, we'll vote to approve or amend the agenda and add topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance. And I have a few recommended adjustments to the agenda. Then a public comment period, and then a renewal stable license for Trinity Stables, and then a request approval for Sunday opening for Sherborn Wine and Spirits, and then Elder Housing Committee FY16 budget review, then Police Department FY16 budget and capital request review, and then Conservation Commission FY16 budget review, and then for routine business, just updated notices of intent checklist, and personnel staffing update. And under Selectmen business, Selectmen reports and meeting calendar review, setting the next meeting for Thursday, January 15th. And the recommended, I'm sorry, I missed the appointments piece. The recommended amendments to the agenda were to remove the item under appointments for the temporary town accountant. And also note that the Kristen Buckler to Traffic Safety Committee item is to be a discussion, not an appointment.
Okay.
Change setting the next meeting from Monday, January 15th to Thursday, January 15th. And removing the executive session,
Okay.
which has been rescheduled to January 15th.
I move that agenda is amended.
Okay, second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, now let's get started. We've got Mr. Bender wishes to discuss a warrant intent article. If you would come up to the table, please, sir.
Good evening. My name is Steve Bender. I live at 85 Brush Hill Road in Sherborn. I would like to start with a question. I have not been able to obtain an answer from the Selectmen's office or from the town planner or from the planning board of what the status of the warrant intent for kennels is.
I don't think we've had any final decision on that. It is on the list of items that, at least at this point, is on the agenda, and I guess there's a question as to whether there's a sponsor for that even. So I don't know that it'll be staying on that warrant, but at this point, there's been no decision by this body, at least, concerning that.
Well, what I have to discuss addresses that, and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to do it now or wait until it's brought up before the board.
That's up to you. It would be subject, if it stays on the warrant, it'll be subject to public hearings both by this board and by the advisory committee. And if it's a zoning change, it would be subject to a planning board public hearing as well. So that's, I mean, if you want to address it now and then address it later at length, if it actually comes before a hearing, that's fine also.
Well, I do have a couple of comments that I would like to make.
Sure.
I've been a resident of this town for about 15 years, and during that time, 86 Brush Hill Road, which is the property across the street from me, has come under 4 attempts to change the use of that property. First was a multi-dwelling attempt, then it was a artist colony, then it was a landscaping business that was being operated illegally, and most recently a doggy daycare business that was allowed to operate there. Non-residents of the town of Sherborn purchased that property for the sole purpose of running a commercial operation. They went to the town and obtained a business certificate that led to a lot of confusion about what the rights of the property owners / business owners were. They had no intent, nor did they ever live in the town of Sherborn or at that property. They started changing the property almost immediately. Fences went up. The aesthetic characteristics of the property began to change. Exterior indications, it became very apparent that the business was about to be opened in that location. They were not forthcoming to the neighbors about what their intent was with the property. They told us that they intended on letting their children live there, when in fact their intent had always been to expand a dog daycare / kennel that they had started in another community and moved to Sherborn. Private and commercial traffic increased substantially on Brush Hill Road. Dog owners brought their pets to and from the property at all times of the day and night. The commercial vehicles started bringing 6, 8 dogs at a time to the property. The number of dogs went from about 10 initially up to 40, 50 at one time. Employees started parking on the public street, which is, as if you're familiar with Brush Hill, you know it's a very narrow street. It's also a scenic street in the town. And they started encroaching upon neighbors on their property and their parking because there was just no room for all the vehicles that were coming and going. All this resulted in many changes to the neighborhood. The wild deer and the turkeys left the area. They're just now starting to come back. Pedestrian and equestrian traffic decreased substantially on Brush Hill Road as the dogs would charge the fence line on Brush Hill. It would scare the horses, it would scare the people that were walking their dogs, the private owners. The noise level increased substantially as the owners of the business were not able to curtail the barking dogs. Neighbors turned against neighbors. Residents of the town turned against the city or the town. Newspaper articles and letters to the editors were published in the local newspapers in an attempt to gain public opinion by both sides. And lastly, legal proceedings began with the intent of suing the town and the neighbors. And it was a bad situation all the way around. I've lived all over the United States, from the most northern area to the most southern area, from the east to the west. I've owned property every place I've ever lived. I've been involved in community affairs in all of these towns and cities that I've lived in. And I've got to say that the bylaws, the zoning bylaws that the town of Sherborn has, are some of the best I've ever seen. And if those bylaws are enforced, we wouldn't have had all these problems. And I don't see the need for licenses of kennels in this town. And that's what I would like you to consider, whether you go forward with that intent for that warrant.
Okay, thank you for that.
On a different note, if I may, I didn't sign up for this.
Okay.
As far-
We do try to limit to 5 minutes, maybe another minute, is that?
It won't take that long.
Great, thanks.
The other thing that I would like to say is the website for the town is somewhat confusing about the notification of the agendas for this body. If you go to the calendar, it very clearly will show you what the agenda was for tonight. If you go to the area of the website that addresses agendas, the last agenda that was posted on there was March of 2014. And it does cause confusion. I, for one, was confused by it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This is the last house on Brush Hill Road?
Second to the last.
Second to the last,
Okay,
okay.
and thanks, Mr. Bender, for that. Brad Van Brunt has asked to speak as well.
Yes. Brad Van Brunt, 127
Hey,
Western...
Brad, if you could do it into the microphone, then Pat is happier.
Make Pat happy.
We all want to make Pat happy.
I ask everyone's indulgence while I read the obituary for a member of our community and also a representative of the Traffic Safety Committee, volunteer to the town. William J. Ford of Sherborn died Wednesday, December 31st, 2014, at the age of 93. Born and raised in Newton, Massachusetts, he served our country proudly from 1941 to 1943 during World War II as a captain in the Army Air Corps, piloting a B-24 Liberator with the 376 Heavy Bombardment Wing. Flew missions out of Tunis and Italy. He flew over 50 missions from bases in the desert of Tunis and Italy, and was recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross and Bronze Star. Bill then received his engineering degree from Northeastern University and set up an office in Newton as a civil engineer and land surveyor. Soon he was designing homes and industrial centers. His business thrived as he combined his design and engineering activities with those of a real estate broker. In 1974, he married Rita Becker Ford, and together they enjoyed 40 years of marriage while living in Sherborn. He was the past president of the Men's Club at Grace Episcopal Church of Newton, served in the town the Sherborn Town Traffic Safety Committee. He was father of Hallie Becker of New York, Barry Becker of California, late Mark Ford, and the late Dean Ford and his wife Judith of New Hampshire. Burial will be private, and in lieu of flowers, contributions in Bill's memory can be made to the Wounded Warrior Project, Post Box 758, 517, Topeka, Kansas, 66675. Thank you for your attention, and Bill, we're going to miss you. You're a great man. Thank you.
Do we have a moment of silence for Bill Ford, please? Okay, thank you.
I was just going to comment that Mr. Ford, before I came to work in the town clerk's office, also volunteered to format computer forms for the clerk's office, before the clerk's office had a computer. So he was very active in any number of things with the municipality.
Yes, in a very impressive life, it sounds like, from what Brad read, and also another one of those great volunteers that the town of Sherborn has. So he will be missed. Next item is a stable license renewal. I know, Peter, there were a couple, you had asked not to have any votes, but I know there were a couple of things on here where they needed our approval. One is the stable license, the other is a alcohol license change. So I'm hoping we can at least vote those. They don't seem like they'd be particularly controversial, but...
I had one question for each one, is why we're getting them now. The stable license request was received 12/22, and the alcohol one application was filed 12/10. So we addressed these on the 18th and the 30th, so here we are later, but that's
Yeah, I
just
don't know.
something internal.
Yes, Mrs. Guthrie.
The alcohol one we did receive, but he didn't have all the paperwork
Gotcha.
together, so we didn't have the paperwork in time for the meeting on the 30th.
Yep.
And the stable license, Jane thought she had brought it in, and it was sitting on her desk.
There you
So
go.
Okay.
that's why.
All right,
All
good.
Where is the stable?
The stable is 65 Farm Road. This is Jane Elias Trinity Stables.
So I move approval.
Okay, I'll second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, that's approved, and we can sign that. Okay.
And I move approval on the extension of the hours from 12 to 6 p.m. on Sundays, moving it to 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
And that's at Sherborn Wine and Spirits, which is 29 North Main Street in the plaza there. And I'll second that motion. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Do we have something to sign for that? Here we go. And that's a change in the hours. Change the Sunday hours, great. Okay. The next item we have on here is budget review for the Elder Housing Committee. And I don't know, David, is this something you're presenting, or is somebody else going to present it, or?
It's
Oh,
Kitty
we got-
Sturgis and Joe Meany from...
We
the
have
Elder
Joe and
Housing.
Kitty here. Okay, that's great. Excellent. So if you would, oh, good, great. You know the drill.
You can have the comfortable seat, Joe.
Oh, Kitty.
I prefer the green one, so that's fine. Sorry. I'm not doing too well with the microphone. I apologize, Pat. Gentlemen and residents of Sherborn, thank you for having us in this evening. Sherborn Elder Housing, or SEHC, is very excited about the updating of apartments started 5 years ago, and more importantly, the enthusiasm of the residents who now are living there. History for a moment. Sherborn residents who felt strongly that there was a need for senior and affordable housing in the town made Woodhaven possible. There was also a need for housing for Sherborn residents who wanted to stay in town, but to downsize their living arrangements. Town land was made available off South Main Street. A bond issue was approved at the town meeting and town elections, and I believe it was 1983 or thereabouts. The principal and interest has been paid by the residents of Woodhaven in their monthly rent. About 5 years ago, the then SEHC committee requested funds to renovate several apartments so that we could continue to be competitive in the local rental area. This updating was very successful, and in 2012, SEHC requested a $500,000 bond issue to complete the renovations of the remaining apartments when they became vacant. To date, 16 units are complete, we are fully rented, and have a cohesive, vibrant community. Woodhaven is funded by the residents' monthly rent. We operate under a revolving fund. We cannot spend money unless it's available prior to town meeting. Town meeting votes our budget amount, but no town funds are expended for the Woodhaven operations. I would like to acknowledge the SEHC hardworking committee, David Curtis, Mike Kickham, Carol Carasy, Marty Waters, Joe Meany, and new members Janet Walsh and Susan Landsman. I would be remiss if I didn't thank Joan Rothney, who left our board in June. She is a real example of being green. Joan has led the landscape ladies and occasionally gentlemen for many years. We are proud of the welcoming appearance when one comes to Woodhaven. Joe Cashin also resigned. At the tender age of 80, he had a chance to go back to work full-time. David Williams and Diane Moores of the Selectmen's Office continue to be of service when we have questions. Now Joe Meaning, who is the glue of our committee, will walk you through the budget and answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kitty. Thanks, Joe.
We submitted our budget on the town form to Ruth on the 22nd. But we also sent you a breakdown that we use, it's got a little more detail in it. I can go through that with you if you'd like.
That'd be great, yeah, or at least any of the significant changes or things that you want to highlight on the budget, that'd be great, and then we might have some questions. Peter,
I'll probably have a
in
couple
particular, might have
questions.
questions.
It wouldn't be an evening without them, Peter, right?
Well, the first few, office supplies, postage, rental ads, that's pretty much the same. The community room expenses are going up this year. They went up, and so we budgeted more money for next year. The principal difference there being that we used to split the Comcast bill with Council on Aging. It's now all in our domain. And we have a more active community, and they're using the community room a lot more. And so we had added a few extra channels so we get more service there. The property management contract, that remains the same. It has for the last, this will be the third year in a row. Outside maintenance is mainly landscaping type items. And that's pretty much staying the same. We have a couple of notes which I'll get to as we review the notes in the end there. Alarm system expenses, basically the same. Building supplies, no change. Rubbish removal, slight increase there, 1%. Electricity, we budgeted 20% more. We were hearing that rates could go up even 29%. I don't know how that's falling out, but we increased our budget anyway.
Joe, is that common area electricity?
Yes, it is.
Because the units pay their own
They pay their own.
Yes.
electricity.
Yes.
And the units are heated by electricity, right?
Yes.
If I remember correctly.
Yes.
Okay, got it, thanks.
So it's common areas and anything, all the outside lighting, parking lots. Lift and elevator costs, basically the same. Apartment turnover expense, that's money we have, we right now have, as you know, 24 units. 18 of them are fully renovated. So we have 6 yet to turn over. So this is just to cover if we have one of the renovated apartments, or one or more of the renovated apartments become vacant, then we might have to do some touch-up paint and carpet. Any unrenovated apartments, if they become empty, we will renovate. So, water treatment facility, that's basically staying the same as last year.
Can I just interrupt on that, Joe?
Sure.
More for David, because we just had some discussions, or there was some email about the Leland Farms, and was it water treatment, or I don't know if the same issues and the same results apply to this
It's a UV
situation.
filter. There wouldn't be any fun impact unless we
No,
consolidated
I'm
our
looking for
contract.
if saving them, because the vendor stepped up and repaired or replaced something we thought was going to be having to be paid for.
Right, the UV system.
Right.
Right.
So you're not, we're, okay.
Right,
don't have
nothing in
anything
the budget
budgeted.
for
Doesn't
that.
impact us,
Right.
okay. Yep.
Repair and replacement, that's a big budget item. In there, many of the things are similar to what they were last year, but key items are, we're figuring on having to replace 8 water heaters in the coming year.
And that's the landlord's burden.
Yes,
That's correct.
yes. We don't get a lot of life out of our water heaters,
Yeah.
about 8 years. So I think that's on the low range of water heaters. It's just what water you have, apparently.
Yeah.
And another significant item would be, we have under there a pergola. This year, we took down the large pine tree that was in the middle of the complex. And we had to remove it for safety reasons. We had advice it was getting old, it had been hit by lightning, and we were concerned about possible damage to people and buildings. When we did that, we took away the shaded area we had where people sit outside. And we're trying to find something we could do. So we're looking at doing something like a pergola in that seating area. Again, I think we mentioned we have a pretty vibrant community right now. So they get together there in the afternoons, and we want to keep that going. I think that's the major change there. Then when you see other charges, we carry $500 for legal expenses that we might incur that wouldn't be covered by town council. Hopefully, we have none. A couple of years ago, we did have significant expenses there, but none this year. The insurance, that's going up 10%, is what Diane learned from the insurance company we could expect. And then fee for services, that's the payment in lieu of taxes, if you will, to the town, based on a formula developed several years ago. And that's gone up slightly. We gave you the calculation sheet, I think, for that.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question later on that, okay?
Fine.
Yep, but I appreciate that.
So our total maintenance budget, 183,802, is basically the same as last year. It's up maybe $500. The next line item that we have there, debt service, that's the 100,438 is the number that Pete Hoagland anticipated we would be paying this coming fiscal year.
But that, just from looking at your notes, that's from, that information was developed over a year ago.
But it was
Which probably
confirmed-
not.
It was confirmed by Ruth.
Okay, so we've updated
Yeah.
that. That's a good number. Good.
It's also hopefully a safe number, because right now, we're still paying off some older,
Right. Which is baked into that
They're all-
number, right?
and Pete was conservative on his estimate of how much more we would be borrowing.
Yeah.
So, for the renovations, that's the only thing we're borrowing money, that we haven't borrowed all the money for yet.
Right.
We had the bond of $500,000, we've borrowed $350,
Yeah.
so that gives us a total budget of $284,000. We have estimated our income that we will have, the money we will have available in our account as of town meeting through April 1st. And we did that by taking what money we had in there starting the fiscal year, adding in all the rentals we received to date, and forecasting a 5% vacancy rate between January 1st and town meeting. And we should have available about $300,000.
And so
we should be
that
able to cover this.
300 comes from the rent, you have two pieces of payment by the tenants, right? Rent and the maintenance fee, or you're calling it all now rent?
all
It's all rent, is how you call it. And that's what that is, it's rent collected as of town meeting date, I guess,
right.
is what you're talking about. Gotcha.
Right.
All right, that was useful, yeah.
I think we covered everything.
Yeah. Can I,
I will say, just as a comment too, we've had a very good year in terms of rental, meaning we've only, well, if there's 24 apartments and 12 months in the year, there's like 288 rental months. We've only had 3 vacancies to date, 3 months.
that's pretty incredible. A couple
So
of
that
years
helps
ago,
us.
you had 3 or 4 vacant units at any one time, it seemed,
Right.
right?
Combination of the renovating the apartments and dealing with recession issues. But
And on the next page where you've got the capital 5-year
Yes.
projection, so it indicates you've done 18 of the units you've renovated, leaving 6 to do.
yes,
On that schedule, which is useful for capital budget committee to build into their projections. But just on that one line item, wouldn't you want to show, you're only showing, it looks like one renovation in the first year, but you've got 8 more units to do, or 6 more units to do. Wouldn't you project a few of those out, or you're not because you don't want to use the crystal ball that way?
Well, I don't, we've already,
This
we
says
have
you
a
did 18.
bond for that money,
Yeah,
right, for the money, so the money is now available to us for the remaining 6 units.
all right. I guess it's up to them how they want to
Yeah,
show that. I
right.
got you.
Yeah, I don't see the one even on here. I think
This right here,
That's
it would
just-
be 1 unit.
That's not even.
But it's not even in the totals?
That's just the unit cost. Yeah, it's, so
Yeah.
so it looks like it's completely outside this budget
Yep.
because it's already been.
It's not, that's
it's-
right.
It's already been bonded.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. On the last page, okay? Well, first of all, let me can I just ask some questions?
Absolutely, please do.
Because you've given us this last page was very useful.
Fee for service?
yeah.
Fee for service?
Yeah. But first, I appreciate, and I hope other folks in town appreciate, the fact that your committee does so much volunteer work to manage this 24-unit housing complex for elderly folks in town, or senior citizens in town, not, and most communities would probably have somebody on the payroll with benefits and all that kind of stuff doing what your committee does. So I think that there's classic Sherborn volunteerism in action, saving us money in spite of all the money we spend everywhere. So I appreciate that. I look forward to seeing, yes, we don't have the model piece that you've submitted, and this is more useful for us to understand what's going on there, so I appreciate that. I look forward to seeing our model and how it all fits when we get our budget books. And we're not, I would not recommend that we take action, even if we were a full body tonight, because we still have yet to see the full BOS budget pulled together.
Our numbers don't play into your budget numbers.
That, I don't know if they do, or, I guess they don't, right?
They're
Yeah.
separate,
They're separate because
like
of the way
Farm
this
Pond.
works. Yeah,
But we do include them in our whole.
yeah, we just haven't had that discussion, that's all. And I got that. I'll cover that. So, just to revisit back the assumptions, and I guess I didn't appreciate it years ago when this whole approach was set up in terms of the method of doing the payment in lieu of taxes and the rationale, because the rationale basically pulls away all of the school costs because you obviously don't have any school children living in that facility. And I just want to throw that out there as an awareness item, number one, because if you were doing your full taxes, as if you were paying full taxes, it would be nearly 3 times the amount of contribution, I guess, is what it would be, or close to it. I'm making no statement about it, but I just, I didn't appreciate that as much as I looked at it more closely here.
You want us to pay more.
I'd love to pay more, but it's really going from one pocket to the other at the end of the day, I think. It's more that the broader picture is a community. The community of Sherborn, whether you have children or not in the schools, pays for the schools. We provide free public education to everybody, and that's built into the tax rates that everybody pays. For this purpose, as part of the development of setting this aside and letting it self-fund itself, one of the elements of the funding that it has to pay, or the costs, is this payment in lieu of taxes, except it's purely on a usage basis, I guess is the way I would describe it. And I'm not saying that's the right way or the wrong way. It's the way we do it. And I'm just processing that a little further, that's all.
Well, and we also pay for...
CM&D direct
CM&D
work, yes.
Direct work, yes.
And you pay your direct share of the insurance.
Yeah, right.
So you've got those additional elements added in, so I get that. And so that was all, and the justification for all that, when this was determined, was a combination of the then BOS, it was the advisory and your committee, and put forth to the residents and voters of the town at that time. So it's consistent with that. All right, I just had to talk it through a little.
And how that works is that's a charge to the residents that
It's
gets...
part of it's part of our budget, and then
So it
It's
equates to a
included.
tax, effectively.
it's in their thing, but no one has asked us for the calculation for deduction.
But just so I understand, this is coming out of the,
Yeah,
it's coming out of your budget.
It's that line item.
But is it actually paid by the residents out of pocket and then,
It's all
No,
in-
they pay a rent.
They pay a rent, and then,
okay,
and then,
so it's taken out of the rent, though, is the way it
Yes,
works? Okay.
yes.
That's what I was
Yeah,
wondering,
yeah.
okay.
right.
So from your budget as a whole, some of it is offset by the rents?
All of it,
All of it is, okay, yeah.
capital and operating. So it's,
Okay.
that's why it's off,
It's off books,
offline, basically.
effectively.
Even though the voters at town meeting approve your appropriation,
Right.
which is part of the budget, it's offset by the revenues. And in fact, your revenues appear to be at a somewhat higher rate than the full cost, including debt service, attributable to
Yeah,
Woodhaven.
and hopefully remains because
Remains that way, yeah.
our debt service went up by $25,000 this year. The hundred
Yes, big
100,000
jump.
was like 75, I
Yeah.
think.
And you have your
We have a
rent,
couple more years like
your
that.
lease agreements, you updated all of your lease agreements in
We
the
update them
recent years.
as the apartments.
And then as it switches
as
up.
they turn over.
But you have cost increases built into that in some fashion, right? If the budget turned out, if the debt service, for example, went up to 200 grand, you'd have to come up with 100 grand more rent in some fashion. You have that ability to do that in,
Well,
That's a big number.
No.
that's a big number, I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah, no, I would say no, we don't.
You don't?
Our agreement up, in terms of rent, is that we can charge up to the HUD fair, final fair market value rent for the apartments.
Okay,
That's a limiting factor.
yeah.
And in many cases, we were well below that. But-
Yes.
But we can also, in the other way of figuring in the rental increase for the fiscal year, is that we take a rolling average of the last 3 years' Social Security
Yeah.
rent increase, and we can increase it by that amount. Well, last year, we could have
Refunding or
we
something?
could have increased the rent by $12 a month.
Yeah.
We were up against the limit, so it was like $2 a month.
But in-
We can't go more than that.
But in years past, you had a rental, which was, depending on what year they got in, and some folks had lived there 30 years, they were working off of the 30-year-old rental rate,
The original
which was
lease.
$117 or whatever it was, the original lease.
Right.
But even those residents were subject to the maintenance piece, which could
Right.
increase to offset the operating part of the budget at that time. That's how
Right.
it worked.
And we're still doing-
What I'm trying to do is, do you have an escalation factor to reflect that should, for example, your water treatment costs quadruple for some crazy reason? Doesn't sound like you have that in the deal, the agreements at this stage of the game.
We don't.
Okay.
Because our reason for being was to provide
Understand.
low, moderate income. So
Yeah.
that's the,
Understand. And I'm just throwing out crazy.
I've got a couple of
But-
questions.
just to finish that up, so we're clear, we had established, we knew when we started on this whole program, we knew what the maintenance portion of the rent was.
Yes.
That's the amount that, when we take that rolling average of the Social Security, and it, like last year, I think the average may have been 1.7, I forget exactly what it was. We take that times the current maintenance portion of the
Oh,
rent.
so you have that, yes.
So it doesn't go up as fast as inflation, if you will.
So, Joe, just a couple of questions. You mentioned that the Comcast increase is because Comcast is no longer being split with Council on Aging. How did that come about? And that,
Well, my recollection is, it started, the Council on Aging was paying the share, their share, because they were using that as an office space. 3 years ago, 4 years ago? 3 years ago, maybe. before they were here totally in the town offices. They had office space there, so there were computers set up there for computer training classes, which we still have. So we had the internet connection, they needed the phone connection. We had TV there for the residents. So they don't use that anymore as a space, and it was determined last year that that should be part of our budget. and
So
not
the
part of
circumstances
council
changed?
meeting.
is-
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Electricity, I just was wondering, that's a high number, and I just was wondering, have you had any kind of energy audit or done anything to look at different kinds of light bulbs? I'm assuming you have, you've done all this other capital work.
We have. Our management people have been very, very effective for us in getting us basically free new lighting, and LED lighting in the
Right.
community room for very small numbers through the Mass Save program, I guess it's I don't know if they call it the commercial portion, but whatever that is. And we have all the parking lot lighting was done 2 years ago for energy saving, and the lamp post lighting, and the hallway lighting, and then they also did apartments. But the increase is mainly, that's $16,000, as Peter asked before. That's just for the, 16 or 19, whatever that number is.
19.2 this
That's
year, yeah.
That's all the public areas.
It's about $1,600 a month. And that's what I was wondering. So you've had those savings, that number would be higher without the kind of savings you're talking about. It would have gone up even more, it
Yes.
looks like. And then where it says water treatment 395, I don't understand what that line reference is. That's the same line on the electricity line. Oh, line 395, okay. You had that under repair and replacement, I guess. Is that, I'm trying to figure out if that note means something that I need to think about or not.
Could you tell me that again?
Yeah, sure. The line for electricity, when you look across, it says public spaces, and then it says water treatment, 395.
Okay. All it meant to mean was the water treatment, the cost of the electricity in the water treatment, for the water treatment facility, for the pumps and the wells and everything, is in the, it should be, at this point, I maybe have the wrong number there.
369.
Should
So
be in the
it's in the operating cost.
369.
Gotcha,
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll change that.
Boy, this was great work and a really clear explanation. Thank you for
We
that.
thought this presentation was a lot easier to read than the other one, and each budget maker has their own way of presenting it, and this works well for our committee.
Good. And thanks for coming in. As Peter said, I don't think we're in a position to take any kind of vote
It's not a problem.
tonight, but it's early on, so I think we understand it now, and much appreciated. And for all you do also at the Woodhaven.
They're a great bunch down there. They're
Yeah.
very
Thank you.
entertaining. Thank you so much.
Again, great to see you.
Okay, Chief Thompson. This is the guy who
I
gave
got
us
an inch thick
about
of
400
piece
pages,
of
I think,
paper,
something like
yeah.
that for his budget? Okay.
Gosh.
I wasn't sure how you wanted to approach
Rich?
his...
I just don't want him to read page by page through his budget. That's
So what, the way it's divided up is in your packet, we had his regular submission budget, and then the separate packet is the, how the budget would look if we were to implement the take-home vehicle program.
Okay, good. Thank you, Chief, Lieutenant, thank you very much.
Good evening, and Happy New Year to all. If it's okay with the board and the town administrator, I was going to start off with the take-home vehicle budget first.
Yeah, and that's the part that probably needs more explanation, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, and I confess, I did go through all this, I'm not sure I understand it, but I think you can probably shed light on that, so thank you.
I can try. So, just to start off, I wanted the board to be aware that I met with the Capital Committee roughly 3 weeks ago and discussed the idea of this take-home vehicle program. And it's safe to say that they were pretty receptive to the idea. It met the criteria that they are pushing for the town and in the best interest of the town. So I wanted to make the board aware that we did sit down with Capital. I have not sat down with advisory. I have not sat down yet with my advisory liaison, so you guys are second stop. So in that packet, it might be easiest if we go through my explanation pages.
Yep.
Start off there. And then I'll walk you through the Excel spreadsheets on the cost of the vehicles as we purchase today, and what I think is something that's going to benefit the term, long-term with the take-home vehicle program.
Sure, just hold up the page you're starting with so we know, get our bearings here. That, okay,
So
great.
it's just about 5 pages in.
And it's in the, under the budget that includes the take-home vehicle?
Correct.
Gotcha, good.
And it's up to you.
Yeah.
If you want me to go directly to the...
No, however you think is
Okay.
best, I'm relying on you. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll go line by line. So under administration for the police department budget for fiscal year 2016, under my salary, there's an increase of $3,035. That's based on the contract I negotiated with the town. Under materials and supplies, station supplies, which includes cleaning products, rubber gloves, shovels, things that we use inside the station to do some basic cleaning, we level funded that. Office supplies, which includes pens, paper, toner, we level funded that. Postage, which includes stamps and certified mailings, we level funded that. Clothing, uniform allowance, that's level funded, that's built into my contract. This 5580-0353 administrative water, we never built in a line to purchase water for the police department, and I spoke with Ruth and I suggested that we do that, so I built that in there, and that's an increase of $300.
And that's just water delivery service?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Some of the guys offered to drink out of the toilet, but I didn't think that was a
Didn't
good
work,
idea.
huh? Do we have a, David, do we have a sort of a bulk order on that stuff?
It's under state contract, all of the water bottle orders. So there are a couple of different companies.
Okay, great.
Under contractual services, we had an increase of $775 to service our office equipment, which includes our computer-aided dispatch and data storage system, as well as our copier. We just got a new contract with the company to utilize a copier that now is very similar to the one that Town Hall uses. We can send PDFs out immediately without having to make a copy and put it onto the computer and send it out. We level funded the administrative info systems, which includes our on-duty scheduler and the state criminal justice information system network, which we're required to have by law. We increased the service to TriTech, which is the company that we have a contract with for our in-cruiser laptops. So that increase of $4,595 is a dollar amount to purchase the additional licenses.
If you did the take-home
If we did the
vehicle.
take-home, correct.
So it's not in the other budget.
Correct. The next item there, I also put under service, Axon Cloud, which is a storage system for the body cameras that we applied for and received a grant through our town insurer, Maya. We are going to be going to a trial period of, I think, 2 years, we decided. Or was it 3?
We've only locked in for 6 months, so I wanted to get them onto the fiscal year schedule, so
Right, so,
we're locked in now from January to June, and then if we don't have funding... it
So
just
you have the
includes
cameras
program.
now, is that right?
They're on
Yeah.
order.
they're on order,
On
yeah.
order.
So
And
this stores it for a certain period of time and
Yeah,
certain
that's...
capacity or something?
Yeah, and the unfortunate truth is that this is hot item because of all the issues that have been ongoing nationally. I do want to say that I actually applied for this grant well before anything occurred in Ferguson, Missouri, because I sat down with my personnel, including some of the union officials that are here now, and the officers agreed that it would be beneficial to all of us to, quite frankly, protect my personnel from frivolous complaints. So Originally, when we had applied for the grant, Maya allowed $5,000, and then they had a second grant where I tried to get the storage system, the cloud system, paid for through the grant, and they denied that. Lieutenant Bento actually worked with Taser, which produces this product, and we actually got the cameras, the actual devices, for free, and Maya now was going to offset some of the costs for the cloud system for the first year. So I'm hoping, moving forward, hoping that we can get some grant funding in fiscal year 16, but Maya hasn't committed to anything like that. So I built $5,000 in for that storage system for fiscal year 16. I also built $5,000 into a diversion service. I've sat down with the chief from the Ashland Police Department, Craig Davis, who I have to give full credit where credit is due. Chief Davis from Ashland developed a jail diversion program while he was the deputy chief in Framingham, which actually became the national model for policing in our country. And he had approached me probably 6 months ago and asked if the town of Sherborn would be interested in sharing a consultant through psychological emergency services between Ashland, Sherborn, Holliston, and Hopkinton. And the idea behind that would be we'd have office hours for this diversion consultant that would actually be embedded with the Sherborn Police Department. So if we were to go to a domestic violence situation where there were kids involved, or there was some kind of issue where we had to deal with an emotionally disturbed person, we'd have an actual expert on call or with us to actually come help us diffuse the situation. So I shouldn't say we, Chief Davis applied for a community innovation grant to help fund the entire position. Unfortunately, the governor's 9C cuts got rid of that grant. He has subsequently applied for a grant through the Department of Public Health. We're hoping to get that next year, but again, I built $5,000 into the budget.
So our share of the position is 5,000?
Correct.
Is that the idea?
Correct.
And because we're a smaller town?
Correct.
Yeah.
We don't have the same call volume for those kind of calls, so.
And how often would you be physically present in Sherborn?
We haven't come up with an actual schedule yet, Mike, but I would definitely make the board aware of that, or David can make the board aware
I'm just
of that.
thinking with that share, it probably is a fairly small compared to other towns, but maybe you don't need them that much.
I would say, without belittling any other town, just by population, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And then the last item was the antivirus software, which is $2,309, I believe. Officer Stickney, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Officer Stickney is clearly our computer expert. And he's my go-to guy for this stuff. So we actually, we were made aware through Mass Chiefs that a few police departments in the Commonwealth that use TriTech, which is a software that collects all of our data, somebody had sent a virus into their system and they lost all their data, and it's actually being held for ransom as we speak. So they're trying to work through that. And I went to David and explained that, we should probably get a stronger antivirus program. And Officer Stickney went out and did some research on it, and we discussed it with David, so
I think we
that's
took
built into that budget.
care of that today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Correct. And then under other charges, dues, and subscriptions, which includes the Bay Area Police Emergency Radio Network, that's a dedicated channel that we would use if we ever had like a major incident on a regional basis. We have to pay a $1,600 fee for that per year, so we level funded that. Under personnel services, there's an increase of $16,140. That includes the lieutenant and the officers' contracts based on their percentage increases. Under overtime, I showed an increase of $85,000, and my justification for that was based on advisory guidance to realize true overtime and anticipated increases in overtime as follows. Court appearances, I built in $9,500 based on our last 3 years of court appearances where officers are required to show up for court. They're entitled to 4-hour overtime blocks to go to court. Again, that's an average that I used. Shift coverage for training, I built in $40,000. That includes in-service,
In-service backfilling overtime, yes.
in-service backfilling overtime. So when the officers are required to do their 40 hours of training per year and other trainings that we select them to go to, we obviously have to backfill when the officer isn't working the shift. So that's
So
what
if somebody goes to the academy or something, this covers it, is that the idea?
Not the academy, no.
Okay.
No, this is, we're required by law to attend 40 hours of training, and usually the Municipal Police Training Committee comes up with the schedule of classes that are available. The mandatory trainings we have to go to are like CPR and defibrillator, firearms, legal updates,
Updates.
defensive
Use of force,
tactics,
defensive tactics.
use of force. So there's certain trainings that we have to go to, and we simply can't afford not to send the officers to. So that's where that $40,000 comes from. Shift coverage for vacation, $71,000. That's based on the amount of vacation time that each officer is entitled to under their collective bargaining agreement. That's a pretty finite number. Storm coverage, I built $5,000 in there based on past major storms that we've had to force people in for overtime. Shift coverage for compensatory time. The officers are entitled to time off, comp time, it's called, based on the averages that Lieutenant Bento and I looked at. I came up with $20,000 for comp time. Earned leave, that would include personal days.
Personal day should be separate.
Oh, I'm sorry, earned leave.
Earned leave is time that's basically earned by the officers when they don't use sick time. They're compensated with 8 hours off every 6 months. They don't use a sick day.
So that's where I built
So
that.
they're off, and you got to cover the shift, and it's overtime.
Correct,
Yep.
correct. Shift coverage for personal time.
Same thing, sort of
Same
thing,
thing,
yeah.
basically. Shift coverage for sick time, I put in $15,000. We unfortunately, this past year, we had a few officers that were out injured and had to use sick time, including somebody to my left. So we have to backfill for those shifts.
Yeah, go.
So this is great to see this breakdown. Like, you've broken down the whole 205,000 with these things, including the last one, shift coverage for the academy. I don't want to jump the gun, but.
Sure.
Well, but on this, really what you're doing is you're projecting under the Pittman schedule also, which we think there's probably some benefit there still that we're realizing. If
Correct.
you weren't on the Pittman, you might be showing a bigger number for some of these items,
Correct.
I suspect, right?
Correct.
But what you've done is you've broken down by the various ways of sort of normal level of usage, if you will, of the need for overtime, such as sick time. You know, versus when somebody breaks their leg, that's
Anomaly.
above and beyond, that's an anomaly.
Right.
But and yet what the objective is here for advisory and for the town is to get to a more realistic level of overtime built into the budget, where we've seen actuals going back to 2011. That was almost 300 grand. It was 250 the next year and something like that.
Right.
That was the non-Pittman schedule, and you had some fairly
Issues.
significant anomalies going on in
Correct.
those periods, right? So
Correct.
we're being prudent here in projecting what is fairly realistic expectation, assuming nobody gets hurt or, you know, that sort of thing.
This is
I
the
get that.
increase, though. This is the increase,
No,
not
this
the
is
full amount.
that's the full amount is
No,
what,
the full amount's 205 on the budget.
yeah, and that's what this adds up to,
Correct,
right?
correct.
Each one of these goes into that 205.
So I appreciate that comment, Mr. Crusoe.
Each one of which goes into.
So
205. I'm
each
not
of
sure
these
I'm
little
understanding.
lines, so all of this adds up to 205.
Does it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just eyeballed it, it looks like it does, so. And if
Yeah, it
Bento had
should.
anything to do with it, I'm sure it does.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike, I just showed the increase of $85,000, but I wanted to break out We
Broke down to 205, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
we've actually got a
Yep,
really,
yep,
we've got a really good software program on duty
Yeah.
that allows us to break
So
this.
I've never seen that before in my 4 years in advisory and a couple of years here so far. So this is good.
So, and then,
Way to look at it.
the last part there is the shift coverage for the academy. We, as I had mentioned last year when I did my budget presentation, we have one officer that we have to send to the academy by law. Unfortunately, the officer incurred an injury, and we had to pull him back. I certainly didn't want to see him do something that would have impacted him for a longer period of time. And I probably shouldn't get into his personal issues, but, yeah, so I just want to explain that. So that will be a one-time fee this year.
Yeah.
Longevity, those are step increases for years of service to the town. There's an increase of $2,100 to that. We've got 3 officers that are going to be receiving $700 each under their contract. Shift differential, that's a flat rate for officers who work the overnight shift, the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. That's also built into their contract. There's an increase of $197. Stipend,
Oh, I see.
well, that's the officer in charge, I'm sorry, that was the officer in charge stipend. That's been level funded because there's not going to be any change in that. I built in under training, and I also captured this as state mandated training, an increase of $5,000. Again, with all that's been ongoing nationally, it's pretty safe to predict that there's going to be a lot of training offered very soon, in the very near future, for de-escalation, dealing with persons that are armed versus non-armed. So I think that's,
So in reality, you've got a $14,000 budget for training, right?
correct.
And one of your first statement of goals here is, we will continue our commitment to producing the best police professional for our community through education and training.
Correct.
And in light of what's going on in the world at large, and having sat in briefly on one of those trainings dealing with bad guys with bombs, I mean, that was an eye-opener to me. The question is, do you have enough? Not that I want to be spending more of other people's money, but that's a fair question.
I think that increase is fair. That's not for overtime. That's actually for like paying for the
Attending the
classes.
classes.
For actually paying for the classes.
Yes.
So, for example, we're going to be hosting a Alice instructor program
Okay,
in
yeah.
February at the police department.
Yeah.
And usually, if you're the host community, the vendor will allow you to have a couple of free spots. So other communities that are going to be sending personnel to go through the Alice instructor training would have to pay a fee. And some of those classes are like $650
Yeah.
per officer. So that's what that dollar amount.
And as you said, it's payment for the classes is
Correct.
what's in the budget. And separately, 20% of the overtime budget, or 40 grand, relates to the fact that you have overtime because somebody's away,
At the
maybe
training.
not on duty, but at training.
Correct, exactly.
All right, so it's a
Correct.
substantial amount. Gotcha.
The next is the incentive, that's the education incentive program.
Yeah.
It's negotiated through contract with the town. There's an increase of $2,325. There's an increase of $650 for holiday pay. Again, that's negotiated through the contract. We level funded the detective stipend. That hasn't increased. I increased gasoline by $4,000. It's based on, Lieutenant Bento and I actually sat down, and we've been looking at how much mileage we've been putting on the cruisers, and I have to say that our officers are truly proactive police officers in the town, and they do quite a bit of patrolling in the community and doing quite a bit of crime prevention, I would say, in the town. So we've seen an uptick in the mileage on the cruises, and obviously with an uptick in mileage.
So that uptick in mileage is also, the increase here is still consistent or justified by that uptick in mileage, because you could argue that because the cost of gasoline, at least for this a period of time here has certainly been going down
Correct.
compared to prior years.
Correct.
So I'm just trying to sort through that. But the other thing I'm trying to sort through is you haven't changed the budget for gasoline under either status quo or take-home vehicle,
That's right.
because,
Because there isn't going to be a difference between how many miles the officers put on the cruiser. So if we have take-home vehicles, you've got 3 officers that are coming in to work the shift.
yeah,
2 are going to be patrolling typically, one's going to be on the desk. The one desk officer's car is going to be grounded.
yeah.
And the other 2, so I don't anticipate any kind of
Yep.
increase in gasoline. And I do want to touch on that, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I have sat down with the union. I do have to negotiate certain things, and sometimes we have to impact bargain things. So when we came up with this idea, and I will say we, it was a collective discussion, the union and I have discussed this at length, and the officers are actually willing to absorb the cost of gas between the town and wherever they reside. So I just wanted to share that with the board, and we can figure out a formula for that. So, again, these guys have been great. My peers, I don't know if they giggle at me because they're angry with me, or they giggle at me because I'm getting things done, but a lot of unions wouldn't work this well with management, believe me when I tell you that.
I just wanted to point out that there's a limited mileage. You guys all live within a certain
Within
distance.
15 miles, yeah,
Yeah.
by law, the officers have to live within 15
So
miles.
that's already built in there. That was a question I
Absolutely.
had, if you had restrictions on this
Absolutely.
program or not.
And it's,
so-
just so we're clear, it's as the crow flies, so
Yeah.
it's from border to border. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, but no one lives in Rhode Island, so just so we're
Right.
clear. So then vehicle supplies, we level funded that. Investigative supplies, we level funded that. Clothing and uniform, we level funded that. That's a contractual obligation. Under contractual services, we level funded telephone and internet. Equipment repairs, we actually added that as a line because we never built in any kind of, any money into our budget in the event that one of our portable radios has an issue and we have to send it over to our vendor to have it fixed. And we almost, we'd send something over to Ruth, and Ruth would say, well, where are we pulling this from? We never had a line item for that. So I built in a $500 cushion based on a few of the issues we've had over the last couple of years. Repair and maintenance of vehicles, I increased that by $4,000 based on the anticipated increase in our take-home vehicle program. I'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, because I'm going to have a question about that.
Sure.
And I'm just confused here. You have the Axion thing,
Exxon, yes.
Axon,
Yep.
the 12 grand, 309, on one in the administration, but in the other you have it over underneath this contractual services. So I'm just seeing this not in twice. Okay, I got it. Never mind. It's just geography in the forms, that's
Okay.
all.
Did I place it?
Just
wrong?
want to be consistent, I would recommend.
Under other charges, training, that's fees associated with instructional courses, I increased that by $1,000. Under equipment, I showed a reduction of $78,830 because this year, under our purchasing plan, that advisory has agreed to, and we've decided to stick to, we are due to purchase 2 vehicles this year. We've got 2 vehicles that are on the way.
So
out
it's
the
a
door.
reduction from the regular approach. It's not a
Correct.
reduction in the budget item.
Correct.
It's, so just
Correct.
semantically, you want to
That's right.
be clear on that, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so this take-home vehicle doesn't have those 2 cruisers in
Correct.
accordance with the schedule which the regular approach would.
That's right.
Got that, yeah.
Under new hire equipment, I showed a reduction of $4,000, but in reality, the state wouldn't give us full credit for the fee that we had to pay for the officer that we're going to send through the academy, which it is what it is. I begged and pleaded, but they simply wouldn't refund some of that money. It is what it is. And then, again, I added another line under equipment, increase of $500 for camera batteries, our radio batteries, things that we hadn't built into the budget in the past, and, we've run into a couple issues here and there. Under personnel services, animal control, I have been meeting with several communities to include Framingham, Natick, Ashland, Hopkinton, and Holliston. We actually have some grant funding through MAPC, and we've been actively discussing the idea of regionalizing animal control. And it was suggested through the representatives from MAPC that some of the communities, in particular Sherborn, take some baby steps toward that idea, because the project probably is going to take between a year to 2 years to actually get some kind of funding for it, hopefully through grant funding. We're looking at Framingham. Framingham has agreed to be the host community. They have a pound literally right over the line on Western Ave. Their facility is in need of upgrades anyway. They were talking about doing a capital project next year to build a new facility, so they've kind of put that on hold with the idea that we're going to regionalize with other communities. So I reached out to the chief of Natick, Jim Hicks, and we talked about using their full-time animal control officer to handle some of our domestic animal issues. So we're going to be eliminating that position from our budget and setting aside $5,000 in the event that we have to pay Natick's animal control officer to come into Sherborn on overtime.
So that's all we'd be, so do you have the 5,000 in the budget? I don't see that.
I put it
Oh,
under
there, I see
materials
it.
and supplies.
I
yeah.
see it down below. Yep, gotcha.
So,
It's right there, yeah. And so that's just to cover the overtime. We're not otherwise obligated to pay
No,
Natick for usage otherwise,
Based-
like during regular time?
based on, that will cover, if we had to place a dog over at the animal facility in Framingham. Framingham has actually offered just to absorb that
Yeah.
for now until we can kind of get this larger idea off the ground. We haven't had any kind of formal agreement with any
Yes.
community,
Yeah.
so I don't know that we want to go down that road on camera, but
No, but the question is, will you be a year from now or 2 years from now, will you be struggling to get additional cost built into this budget for this type of service?
I don't
Is the
believe-
question.
I don't believe
You
so.
don't think so?
I don't believe so, no. So,
You're the expert.
you want to get into the capital?
Yeah,
Yeah, show us how this works.
yeah.
I'm going to try to show you how this works. You give some questions. Good. So, the first Excel spreadsheet that I showed you there is the operating budget expenditures over the past 5 years. So I showed in fiscal year 11, we did not purchase a vehicle. I showed you my appropriated police budget and the vehicle percentage, the cost of the vehicle in my budget as a percentage. Fiscal year 12, we purchased 2 vehicles. My appropriated budget was $1.3 million and some change. And because we purchased those 2 vehicles, that ate up 4.83% of my entire operating budget. Fiscal year 13, we purchased 1 cruiser. That ate up about 2.35% of my budget. Fiscal year 14, we purchased 1 cruiser. They ate up again 2.35% of my budget. In fiscal year 15, we purchased 1 cruiser. Correct? Yes. And that ate up 2.73% of my entire budget. So I just kind of wanted to show you.
Now you're looking at 78 in the regular approach.
Correct.
Of a 1.6 million budget.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
whatever that percent.
Yeah, and I want to say that was a
It's
little.
going to be like 3.5 or something.
Somewhere in there.
Three something.
I'm not going to argue with you
I
about
don't
numbers.
know.
You're a CPA or something like that, right?
Not anymore. Not here.
So the next Excel spreadsheet I showed you is the police vehicle mileage usage. So there are the vehicles that we have. I've identified them by our call numbers, so it'll show vehicle number 1511, 1512, 1513, and so on. And then I showed you the purpose of the vehicle, the type of vehicle, the year of the vehicle, the make and model, and the mileage. Now, this is going back, again, to 3-4 weeks ago, maybe even a month ago, a little more than a month ago. I showed you how many weeks in service we've had, the town has had the vehicle, and an average of the miles per week we put on the vehicle, the number of officers assigned to the vehicle, and then the estimated replacement schedule. So if you go down, we've got the Explorer 1511 and the Caprice 1512 that are due to be replaced this year. Those are the ones that have to go. And ironically, the Caprice, that has been the anomaly vehicle for us. Literally 45 minutes after I did this capital presentation to the capital committee, 1511 caught on fire. So we had to ground that and put it down at the
So
scene
we-
spontaneously. I think one of the guys threw a flare in there just to get a new car. I don't know.
So the weeks in service were as of a month or so ago?
Correct.
So if we're replacing, would you, like, if you're saying we're replacing in FY16, like July 1st, somewhere very quickly, so 6
Correct.
months more of usage of that car. So it's roughly a three and a half year life to these service vehicles?
Yeah, the average life of a typical police vehicle is 3 years, typically.
Okay.
We've also shown, excuse me, Chief, the
But-
past 5 years or so, we haven't had any car that was scheduled to be replaced make it to the end of the
To
fiscal
the end of
year.
the period, yeah.
We've had a car sitting at the highway garage pretty much for the past 5 years prematurely.
Yeah.
So again, going back to what the original, buying one, buying two, alternating, having a year with none.
Isn't really
It's
working.
not working.
Yeah.
And the fact that this car caught on fire, they are going to repair it. It's going to cost $1,000 for the deductible. We're potentially looking at more insurance claim money on that, but it will come back to us, but it'll come back to us with 95,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
So if it comes back and then needs a transmission put in it, and it's 6 months away from the next fiscal year,
Right.
it'll end up sitting at the highway garage.
Versus, so, and the other way to look at this, these are getting 30-something thousand miles a year put on them, versus the bottom three are more like 10 to 12,000 miles a year.
Correct.
Which are the assigned vehicles.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is key to this
And would you
presentation.
expect that, yes, would you expect that for the car, that similar type of 10 to 12,000 miles for patrol duty cars as
Actually-
assigned vehicles?
Actually, we figured roughly, each officer puts about 9,800 miles on a
Patrolling.
vehicle while they're patrolling, each officer, so.
Okay, so that's consistent. That was key.
The next Excel spreadsheet was vehicle maintenance and repair costs, and again, I broke that out by vehicle. And as you had just mentioned, Mr. Crusoe, the bottom three are take-home vehicles. So you can see that the cost, vehicle maintenance costs are far lower than the vehicles that are in the pool program. And again, 1512 has been, again, an anomaly.
Rushing.
It's cost us some money to repair. What were some of the issues we had with that?
The AC compressors that have cost us about $2,000. And we also had seat mounts, motor mounts, oil leak, fair amount of problems.
So, the next Excel spreadsheet that should be in front of you is the take-home vehicle cost and purchasing cycle. So with this capital plan, fiscal year 16, that vehicle cost is based on state bid. Okay, so one of the questions that one of the capital members had asked me is if we purchase these vehicles, in mass, do we get a discount? We already get a discount. It's a state bid cost. It is what it is. So if we were to purchase 9 vehicles in fiscal year 16 under this capital project, the total cost would be $354,736.80. As you scroll down and you look at fiscal year 21, I built $53,603 into that. plus insurance. That would be the replacement of Lieutenant Bento's take-home vehicle.
So the insurance is in the 101? The annual insurance? When I looked at this, I'm not sure you captured the annual insurance for the car.
Yeah, well, when I sat and spoke with Dave Williams about this, he actually thought that I was a little high on that.
On the dollar amount, but it looks like if I do this line item here,
Yep,
it's just 1 year's worth of insurance times 9
right,
in that number.
right.
So where's the remaining 9 years of insurance for the 9 vehicles? Down in here? That's my
Well-
question.
The reason I did that was because that number, that 750, that's a big number. And as the cars get older, they depreciate. And actually, David, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Tahoe that we just got, Maya quoted us 500
It's 450.
400.
All right, so if insurance is $500
Yeah.
or whatever it is for, which surprises me, it's not, of course, I have a 17-year-old driver that backs up into other cars, so
Yeah.
I'm not used to these numbers.
You've got a 45-year-old chief that banged into librarian, so.
Okay,
I know where you're going with that, but that's why I built that larger number in
down
there.
here, or that,
Right.
okay.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Why isn't it broken out over 10 years? Yes. So then I also built in the average annual maintenance costs of $72.25 over 10 years. And I put that in there as an estimate based on what our state vendor suggested. And I also, I'm sorry, that's not what I put in there. 5% increase I built in for Lieutenant Bento's vehicle over that 5-year period.
So on that maintenance cost, I'm trying to understand the math here. You've got, on the current purchasing side, you got $8,500 a year for 10 years. It's $85,000. And on this one, you've got $72.25 over 10 years, but you've got $101,150.
Right, so for the take-home vehicle, all the information that I gathered doing the research suggested that there was a reduction in annual maintenance costs to vehicles that were take-home vehicles. So that's how I broke that number out. And I actually used a lower number, I used 15%. Some of the studies suggested that there was an annual repair and maintenance savings of 20% per vehicle. But I used a lower number just to be safe.
But his point, I'm still struggling. How do you get to the 101? Why isn't it 7,225 times 10? Or 9 vehicles over, maybe that's what it is. All right, the math,
Is math not
you don't want to get us all balled up on the math. You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And so, if you can clear that up, let's assume your math is good, it's just,
Yeah.
it's just fuzzy math a little
I
bit.
think I may have left something out.
Yeah, and so like the
I'll correct
annual
it.
insurance, you know,
Yep.
here's the insurance we think is the right number per car, per
Right.
year,
Mhm.
and that's built into this thing over the 10-year period for the 9 cars, and the maintenance, and that, all of that hangs with the ancillary, you know, write-ups that you see that a take-home car is probably going to have less maintenance, which is inconsistent with what you've done with the budget, however, on maintenance, from what I see.
And the other thing is you've got 15 vehicles under the current purchasing cycle, so why is your maintenance cost only 15% more than when you only have 11 vehicles? I would think the savings would be even greater.
Possibly. I didn't want to go,
Well, you've got 4 fewer vehicles, so already you're however many, whatever percent that is, roughly 20% less.
But he's likely to be rolling cars out of this, so that's not 15 the whole time. It's over the 10 years, we've purchased 15.
So we've only got 11 at
Every
any one
3
time, is that what
years,
you're saying?
right, so, right,
We have fewer.
9, or however many at any one
yeah,
time?
we have 9. We have 9
So
today.
under
Nine
both,
today.
you'd have 9 at any one time?
Correct,
Okay, gotcha.
correct. So we'd be increasing the fleet,
Okay.
okay? So I can correct this. I
Or
think what I
just,
did is I left a line out of there. That's my fault. So for tonight's
Well, we
discussion.
don't pay it to be a, financial.
Well, they do it
whiz.
as training, right?
I'll
Long as
add
you keep
another
us safe,
$1,000 for
That's
the-
really what matters, just
Yeah.
keep us safe, okay?
So I came up with a total cost over 10 years, and again, I can go back and look at this, of $558,268.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the next Excel spreadsheet I have is the 10-year projected costs under the current purchasing cycle.
Yeah,
And it's pretty self-explanatory. We're due for 2 vehicles this year, 1 in 2017, so on and so forth. I increased the cost per vehicle by 5% again, based on what the state contractor, state bid contractor told us. And then I built in our average annual maintenance cost of $8,500 over 10 years, obviously is $85,000. And I came up with a total of $819,809. So roughly, we're looking at a long-term savings, I think, of $261,540 to the town.
right, that's what your final schedule says.
And that's not a net present value, that's an overall number.
Yeah.
That's an overall number.
Yeah, and that assumes, so besides some math to clarify and make it clear how, roughly how it works, because you're up against, we're up against there's already a $2.5 million capital request list, which this would go on top of if it went into play this year, right? So there's that. The other piece is, so one of the things I look at is I just sort of look and say, well, where's the break-even point in terms of time, Can you, it looks to me like it's somewhere in the 6 to 7 year range is the break-even, where the costs are identical. If the car doesn't last, if the take-home vehicle program cars don't last 6 years, it's more expensive. If they last more than 6 or 7 years, we win,
Right.
is how I see that. And so that's really, part of it is the life of the car assumption
Right.
is critical for everybody to be comfortable with, to get behind this sort of
Right,
thing.
and that's
right?
why I wanted to emphasize that, the average officer, Sherborn police officer, in a year does roughly 9,800 miles.
Yeah.
So we're already replacing vehicles every 3 years that are, creeping over the 100,000 mile
Yeah.
threshold.
So some other things about this is, because the reading thing educated me a little bit about the difference between a take-home vehicle versus an assigned vehicle. And, they talk about big cities, and the take-home vehicle makes sense for big cities because otherwise you got to find a place to park the cars. Now,
Right.
yes, we have some parking limitations, but not really, right?
Yeah.
So there's that piece. There's the piece of restrictions of distance, and since everybody has to live within 15 miles of crow flies, there's that piece, but also restrictions on usage types, where what you're doing there seems to be something you have to clarify, and/or whether you have restrictions on years of service to be able to get one of these rides. You see, I don't know what your thoughts have been on those sorts of things.
Sure, so for me, years of service really isn't an issue. I will say that the most junior officer is going to get the vehicle that we just purchased in this fiscal cycle,
Yeah,
okay? And that's going to have to be replaced, obviously, sooner than the other vehicles. And I showed that on one of those Excel spreadsheets.
yeah.
But what was your other question?
So what you did, the years of service, and we covered the distance, the take-home vehicle versus the assigned vehicle. It doesn't go home with the officer.
Right, so we call it pool vehicles, the vehicles that don't go home with the officer.
Yeah.
That's the system that we were working on.
No, but there's a different, in other words, the readings talked about, there's a car assigned to an officer, and it just sits at the station. And he drives, the officer, he or she drives their car in, gets into their ride, has all their equipment, off they go to do their day's work.
Yeah.
come back, leave the car there, drive home in their car.
That's a different kind of program, though.
That's right. and I'm
Yeah, that's
just-
different, yeah.
bu-
That's,
So it's part of the material that I looked through here. So I just want to hear why that wouldn't be a way to go. And I think I'll help you. The segue is that there are a whole bunch of non-financial benefits that you haven't even addressed.
Sure. There are absolute benefits to the officers, no wear and tear on their personal vehicles. One of the things that I mentioned to capital, which to me is critical as the chief in the town, is that there is a trend ongoing in the state where a lot of municipalities, the larger police agencies that are now currently under civil service, are moving away from civil service. So what that means for me is, for example, the town of Westwood just got out of civil service. The town of Wellesley got out of civil service 4 or 5 years ago. The town of Framingham just negotiated with their patrol officers to get out of civil service. Well, historically, in order for you to get hired by a civil service community, you have to be a resident for at least a year in that community, take the state exam, and hopefully score high enough on the exam to get an interview, okay? As these departments start moving away from civil service, it's going to be a lot more difficult for me to recruit and retain quality personnel, because frankly, if I'm and I was at one point, a 23, 24-year-old young police officer, I want to go to the hot calls. I want to go and get in the police car, and I want to, do some police work and catch some bad guys. We've lost a few personnel from this department off to the state police. A lot of that is because the state police pay a lot more money than the town of Sherborn Police Department. So for me as the chief, this is yet another bone, if you will, to retain personnel. And sitting down and talking with the union guys, I mean, these guys were like greatly excited about this idea, and I think it's I think it's mutually beneficial to the department and the town.
So Chief, if somebody's got a vehicle, an officer has a vehicle assigned to them under this pool program, are they on duty from when they leave their house until they get back to their house at night? And so the hours on patrol or working for the town of Sherborn include the commutes?
We discussed that, and we had an offline conversation. I spoke, this is why I had Officer Graziano here as the union president. They won't be on duty.
Okay.
However, that's not to say that if, Officer Graziano is on his way home, and I won't tell you where he lives, and he runs into a motor vehicle accident, or he runs into a woman flagging him down, he's obviously going to pull over and help that person.
He sees Selectman Caruso doing 90 miles an hour on a local road, would he have, in another town?
In another town.
Another
yeah.
town.
Under the mutual aid agreements, he can step in, right?
Middlesex County, you can.
Yes.
Some of the officers live outside Middlesex County, and we actually discussed,
Because I do all my speeding in other towns, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
Other counties, right?
Here
yeah.
yeah.
I'll refrain.
So, in all seriousness, so
Yes.
if they were to make an arrest or to pull over a speeder or help with an accident, is that on-duty time? And if it's on-duty time, is it charged to the town of Sherborn?
It could be, but...
Okay. But they're already in that boat,
Yeah.
they'd just be in their own car, doing the same thing?
We've had a few officers on the way home stop and help out with car accident, and they haven't come back to me and said, "Here, Chief, here's my overtime slip." So that's what I'll say. It's an anomaly. It doesn't happen often.
I'm just reacting to some of the claims in here about what's good and bad about the different programs. So
Right.
Trying to understand that.
Yeah.
Good.
Will there be any, this might be more for David, 1099 ramifications, compensation issues here?
I had talked to the chief that there could potentially be some sort of IRS implication because the IRS might see it as a benefit.
Yes.
But we're not giving it to them as bonuses, that we're giving them the vehicles to respond as emergency responders.
Yeah.
And I think that exempts out of that.
Right, and there's actually a case law decision, and I could probably find it for you, where a police chief tried to claim their vehicle in their retirement and
Oh, it's part of his compensation?
and they
Yeah,
got shot down. So
Yeah.
that may shed some light on that.
It's still, I still want a better assurance from somebody who's a tax professional.
We could do,
And like Peter pointed out, I noticed in these reports, at least, and some of, I appreciate you tried to get us a lot of different information from public sources, I guess, and some of this isn't directly relevant probably, but it did seem like on the pool vehicle, one of the big savings was the parking cost from cities where you would have to pay to park at a city parking garage, for example. And so if that's not included here, our savings might be less from that, or at least on an operational level might be less.
no, because I didn't even, honestly, Mike, I didn't even pay attention to the parking savings or any of that.
Well, we wouldn't have any yet.
We wouldn't have, because
We don't pay to
parking
park.
issue, yeah. We might actually open up a few parking spots for the library,
Right, that's right. You might.
upside to that.
But reading this stuff, Rick, in terms of what they describe in terms of the life of the car,
Right.
they talk about it doubles the lifespan of 2 to 3 years. It's doubling, nearly doubling, or they last 2 to 3 years longer in one study.
Right.
Less, you know, instead of 20 to 2 years, it goes out 5 years, so there's 3 years. So,
Right.
again, it goes back to the 10-year
Right.
assumption is
And
suspect, can be suspect and picked apart.
absolutely. And to that point, you said it yourself, those studies are major police departments, large
Yes.
police
Yes,
departments.
yeah,
And
beaters.
I could make a good, or I will say as an argument, not even argument, just as a point of opinion, that, you know, the bigger cities do a lot more miles on the vehicles. They do a
Right.
lot more patrolling, they
Right.
do a lot more responding to calls. So I could see, you know, a major, you know, metropolis, you know, burning through a car in 7 years.
Well, some of these were big western cities, too. We don't have that many square miles the way Tacoma,
Correct.
Washington, one of those
Yeah,
other
yeah.
places.
And that one study is a blind study. It refers to, you know, City A and City B, so you don't even know what department it is.
Yeah.
But I'm going to guess that at least one of them is probably a county
So they have
sheriff.
400 cars. One of them has 400 cars.
Right,
So
right. So there's
it's a
probably
big place.
covering, you know,
Yeah.
like if you use like, you know, the LA Sheriff's Department, I mean, some of those guys and ladies patrol, you know, hundreds of miles, you know, of area, you know,
Yeah.
on their
Sure.
beats, so.
I assume somebody on advisory with the math skills is going to be able to do a net present value calculation and really give you a dollar for dollar comparison between the two approaches. I appreciate you've given us kind of a rough
Yes,
approach and some of the factors to consider into it, but I think in order to really know what the savings would be, we've got to discount the savings over the period of however many years is appropriate, and, you know, understand that we're either coming out of pocket for the upfront cost now, or we're bonding it, in which case it's a little more expensive. So, but it's a great, I mean, it's another one of your innovative ideas that you're throwing out there to see if it makes sense, and it's really great. Thank you, Chief.
welcome.
Can I just ask one other
please
question
do.
that you're likely to encounter is the concept of a phased-in approach versus, you know, instead of doing 9 vehicles at once, 3, and a couple of years down the road, 3, or 5 years down the road, 3. You know, that's not an attractive proposition, I'm sure, for you and the great team that you have. I mean, you know, keeping the team motivated is very important,
Right.
from my perspective.
And I hear what you're saying, I don't think that the cost savings would be as beneficial.
It's more a trial basis as opposed, you know, to see that the cars last a period of time. That's
well-
I don't know if that's
We'd
worthwhile
probably have to throw
or
a
not.
budget car in, I think, if we did that.
He's the.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
right now, we have, looking at the fleet, if we were to do the 9 cars and get rid of the 2 that are at the end of life, we have a couple that will survive.
You convert
as
over
spares.
as spares,
And
yeah.
and they'll be okay, but if we needed 3 or 4 cars to assign, say we only bought 5, we needed 4, the cars that
It's
we were
risky.
planning on using as spares wouldn't survive as full-time patrol vehicles for another year. We'd have to probably buy 1 car to be a pool car or a fleet car.
And from my perspective, Lieutenant Bento has actually been the case study. He's had a take-home vehicle.
Yes. No,
And, you know, he's,
that's the 2005 car, or whichever.
Mine's the
Yeah.
10 Expedition,
Okay,
Yep.
and it's right
Yeah,
now
yeah,
at
there it is, yes.
47,000 miles,
Yes.
I believe.
yeah.
The other thing with that list is the bottom 2, the 1517 and 1518. The 1517 was a donated vehicle, and the 1518 was purchased with drug funds.
Right.
So neither of those 2 have been bought
Out of the budget.
out of the budget, so that's helped us tremendously by spreading the fleet a little bit.
But if
keeping the
you're,
miles off
but if
the
you're
other
trying to
guys.
get 9 cars, right? Can you find 3 out of this list of beaten ones and so forth? That's a question you're gonna have to address. And you're already,
Running through my head. Well, with what we have already for assigned between the detective, myself, and the chief,
There's
that
not
cuts
that- nothing
3 out of
available.
the mix. We
yeah,
have the chief's old car, which is an unmarked, so it's not an ideal patrol
Right.
vehicle. It doesn't have the cage, it doesn't have the laptop computer, the other equipment that's needed for patrol.
yep.
So we're really only left with the 1513 car on that list is a patrol vehicle.
And you know what I did, I'm glad you just mentioned that. The other thing I failed to mention, too, there are some costs in there that I couldn't predict moving forward. So, for example, we just purchased the new Chevy Tahoe.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've heard about it, I haven't seen it.
It's out there, yeah. I'm told it looks like a hearse, I don't buy into that, but, so the new Chevy Tahoe has different dimensions from even last year's model,
Yeah,
okay? So that's critical for our purposes, because, as Lieutenant Bento mentioned, the Taurus doesn't have a protective cage.
yeah.
So, as the manufacturer makes these adjustments to the interior of the vehicle, the exterior of the
Can't
vehicle...
reuse the old
can't-
cage or
they-
whatever.
They don't retrofit, so there's a cost to that. How do I come up with a dollar value on that? I can't, but I will say that the way things have trended with police service vehicles over the last 5 years even, they've literally changed over the last 5 years, almost year to year,
Yeah.
so...
Okay. Thank you. We're not taking any votes today, but the explanation is much appreciated,
Okay.
and very clear and thorough. I appreciate that.
Okay. You want me to go through the other budget, or you want to stand by on that, or?
The original, the regular budget?
Yeah.
No,
I think that's pretty clear after what you
Cleared that.
just
Yeah,
went
we
through on
talked
this one.
about
Yeah,
it.
it's
Yeah.
not,
Are you saying you're tired of me talking, Mr. General?
no.
It goes up about
but everybody else is.
70,000.
What's that?
If you don't go forward with this program, the budget goes up about 70,000 just to cover the 2
Right.
vehicles.
Yes.
Right, and the capital differential was as presented.
Yeah, the other part, you haven't talked about the capital cost of this purchase here. That's,
Well, that was the 800
Outside of
versus
that.
500, wasn't it?
Right.
no, the cost of borrowing, or,
Oh, right, okay.
that's not
Oh,
factored into
okay,
the cost
right, if
here.
we bond, if we
You know,
bond it,
that's if
right,
you
right,
bond
right.
it.
Bonding and whatnot, yeah. And actually,
Not that that's a huge number, but it's,
Ben Williams was at that capital meeting, and he's far more
He's all
intelligent
over
than I
that,
am with
yeah.
the numbers, so.
Yeah, Ben's the guy who's going to do the real
yeah.
And he actually-
comparison.
I don't.
I like what you're talking about. I think the key is life.
Correct.
That's the whole.
Yeah, and again, I'm banking on just the average that each officer puts on the car. Again, we get rid of cars right
In the-
around 100,000 miles, and if they're doing 9,800 miles each officer,
A less intensive usage at the same time, right? More gentler use. if
and
you will.
right, they're not constantly running,
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, yeah.
anyway,
That's good.
food for thought.
Thank you.
Is there a preference on which budget you would want included in the selectmen's model? Would be the higher number or the number with the program?
Indifferent, I think, maybe I want to run them both ways. Can you do that? Are you talking about for the final model that's going to advisory?
See, I think if
Yeah.
you use the take-home vehicle budget, which is a lower budget, to suck up the available funds in some fashion, I don't think we should be doing that. At the same time, I don't want to suggest that we don't
That we've
support
rejected
the
That we don't do
concept.
that.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
All right.
I think I support the concept, subject to,
Proof.
real,
Tweaking-
a little more
tweaking some
tweaking and some real, and I think ultimately you're going to be showing something pretty up there, right? I think you're going to have to do a PowerPoint
Absolutely.
sell on this if it goes forward.
Well, and I want to know that Ben Williams or whoever is
Yeah.
going to be able to say, yeah, this saves the town money in the long run, even if it's more expensive this year. Because if it doesn't save the town money in the long run, it's a nice benefit, but it's a lot harder to justify
Absolutely.
within the budget.
Right.
Great.
Good, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, gents. Great to see you.
Thank you, officers.
Thanks for everything you guys do. 24/7, 365. Good job, Rick.
Yeah, it was great. Okay. Conservation, and Mr. Lesser's coming up to the microphone, and thank you. Okay. This one looks a little more straightforward. We're not having any take-home wetlands programs or anything like that.
Yes. How does this work? Hi.
Hey, good. So, Mike, if you can go through, I think it was really helpful when you weren't here when Elder Housing went through, but they focused on what the bigger differences were between last year and this year. But whatever you think we want to, we should hear, but in particular, if there's significant differences, that'd be helpful to know.
Well, there's not a lot of significant differences in the $50,000 budget where of 1%, $500 or $699. But sure, I'll walk through it. The budget-wise, I have a few other issues to talk about in terms of our land management stuff that have some issues that are not in the budget per se, but have cost issues. So I don't want to forget to do that because there's some immediate issues. Essentially on the staffing, which is the vast majority of our budget, we're fitting within the 1.5% increase and including the COLA. But we now have the new staffing arrangement that we're starting out this year, where we have the agent administrator at 18 hours.
If you want to,
And an administrator, what?
I'm sorry, I want to move them to the right page.
To this-
About
Yeah,
five.
okay.
Form,
Yeah.
the last form?
Last
Yeah.
one? Okay, great.
Sure. Instead of having the agent administrator at around 33 hours and a minutes clerk, we now have an agent administrator at the 18 and a half, and an administrative assistant who also does the minutes at the 19 and a half. And we just started that within the last month. And so it seems to be going well so far.
And that budget neutral, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we made this transition. It's budget neutral, might even, because we were understaffed for a month or so. There might even be some savings this year because it was a little tough for a little while we were during the hiring process. But it's looking like this new setup will work out well. Actually, there's a hidden savings, I guess not so hidden, but a savings not in our budget in the fact that there's no longer a benefited person going forward. And so the new budget has this configuration of the two-person setup. And in terms of the hours, the office hours that are available for the agent to stay the same, plus appointments, we might expand how we present the hours in terms of, because now the administrative assistant will be there when she's more well-established. But she has fixed hours each during the week. And so that's the main part of the labor budget there. Implicit in the labor budget is, and staying within the budget, is that we've managed to now, there's just been a continuing issue over time of our agent administrator who's fully qualified after 7 years and not being at an approved maximum level, that she'll be brought up to this level now so that we resolve that sort of issue of these little step increases that I've been doing for 5 years now.
I think Personnel Board and Advisory had requested go and get it.
Yeah, that's been a sort of a sore point, and now with this new configuration, we could fit that in.
You could get there, yeah.
So what's
Get there.
the percentage increase, though, from 2620 to 2804? The hourly rates?
For the, just for the agent administrator? That's
Yeah.
about a 5, that's going to be about it's the COLA plus about a 5%. So you have about a 6.5% in the hourly rate there.
Okay, so the only way that works is because you've changed the total
It's the
number of hours.
reconfiguration. It fits in there. And I think it's it's an appropriate, good strategy for us. I think our agent administrator is a good professional person. It's somebody that we want to encourage to stay with us. It's not easy. This setup does have savings that are not here.
but it's not so easy to find necessarily this kind of setup where you have this two-part process, where you don't have a full-time agent administrator.
And you get 126 extra staff hours out of the new budget than you did out of last year's budget.
You mean the extra
In other words,
2 hours a week? Yeah, there's,
it works out to 126 hours, which means you're getting more resources for the,
you have
a little more
different
bang for
mix,
the
but
buck,
it's a different mix of resources.
overall, yeah.
It's more hours, but it's a different mix, but no longer as many senior hours as opposed to, there's more hours, but it's less hours of the agent administrator and more of an administrative assistant.
And
So it's a
is-
different quality of hours, but there is physically more.
And I don't know if I don't know how your commission manages the staff positions, but have you been able to allocate work assignments and job duties so that it makes sense within the new structure that you have? I mean, this implies that the agent was actually doing a fair amount of work that was probably below her pay grade, or not utilizing her skills, and you've now tried to right-size some of that, it appears, but I'm just wondering if that's actually worked the way you had hoped it would work, or the way it should work.
It's only been a few weeks.
Okay. But you do have a plan.
Yes,
sort of thought that
it
through.
seems to be working that way. I mean, that's the way, I mean, it was partially when we even collapsed it about 7 years ago. We actually had something akin to what we have now before that, and it was a matter of, we had more hours, and then we collapsed it a little because we figured with an agent administrator, they could do some of that lower-level stuff more efficiently, and so we actually shrunk the number of hours. Now we're expanding it, as you say, by the 100 hours or so, because you can't get, there's always that sort of management time. But we think that we can get more done, and we're trying to, and there are more in the sense of how we spend our time, which sort of gets into some of the bigger issues of that we're getting to do more stuff on land management, which has always been something, and we could talk more about what we're doing, as well as there's some more issues coming up with stormwater management stuff that is an increasing time burden that our agent administrator has been filling in. In fact, when she gets through this training period and this transition, she actually wants to present, because there's a whole set of issues coming up on stormwater management that I'm sure David is all aware of, and that I see some of the traffic about some issues with
but none of that
AECom.
has-
But she wants to present with
Budget
Ed.
ramifications here next year, or capital?
No,
Of-
her involvement so far in stormwater has been, I don't want to say invaluable, but it's been greatly appreciated.
But we don't have to deal with anything with a painful
It's not a budget.
cost.
No, basically part of some of the more efficient things we're trying to do is sort of allowed some of that increased burden to be actually, that she can do it, although she still has to do some more work catching up, because before she presents to you guys with Ed Wagner about some of the stormwater management. But that's an area that's of increasing importance.
You know, 2 years ago, or whatever it was, we were dealing with, all hell is coming down on the town because we got to worry about Charles River and our catch basins and all that stuff. But the regs hadn't been provided, and we weren't in compliance with 2009 regs or whatever it was, and there were big numbers being thrown about that we're going to have to deal with. And yet, here we are another year later, and we're not really dealing with those, other than
But there was a large amount approved already to address those issues. I think we've spent very little of it. We just recently ordered some equipment to do
Yeah,
some
the
plotting of items.
But I'd have to go
But-
back, look at my notes. I mean, we approved like 100 and something grand,
But-
right?
but yeah,
But there was another 500,000 sort of waiting
I
in the
think that
wings, and that's
number-
what I'm wondering about.
That's part of what, I think that's
Yeah.
part of what Bridget wants to work with David and Ed to talk to you about, all that bigger picture, because there's
Okay.
things about where you have to map out all your outfalls.
Yeah.
And now finally, the purchases, I just noticed that, basically, Bridget was working on these, sort of working out the equipment that needs to be purchased for that kind of stuff, so that's, all those things are approved, but now it takes time to,
So that
It's
money's
the-
out there already, that's not part of this budget.
All right,
That's-
but
Yeah.
you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
There was
well, I'm
another
asking,
big
I'm not saying
slug,
I'm asking.
yeah.
Would-
Big
oh yeah,
slug
there's a
that
there's a
we-
major effort to
Boom and
come
doom.
into compliance, that.
Yeah.
I just
But
don't know
Michael,
how many
there's nothing in
years.
your budget about that.
Nothing in here.
So
Oh, yeah, no, it's not.
What you're saying is
It's
already
basically staffing. What has turned out to be reasonable synergy is her contributing time to help with that
Smart on
process.
this and all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
That's good.
And
But in
she-
terms of the mapping, that's not things we need to buy, that's not services we need to procure
Well,
from other
that's already
places?
part of the procurement with
It's
AECom.
already been approved under
That's what I'm
that
wondering.
appropriation a
Okay.
couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, okay.
Yeah.
Right, and it's just a matter of making sure the right equipment is purchased and what
Yeah.
system we use, and she's been she's been helping out with that. I mean, there's a synergy with that, since obviously a lot of the outfalls are all wetlands kind of related, and so
Sure.
it's turned out to be sort of something that, as we're seeing with the assistant doing more possibly, and also we're trying to streamline some of the regulatory process that we do here, that would also allow basically some of that stuff to be done without an increase in her budget of time. And so that's stuff but that's something you'll hear more about, because she wants to get together with Ed and David and have a separate presentation in front of you guys.
And then you were on to talk about land management, I think. a
Oh,
little
yeah,
bit.
right. But I guess for the rest of our budget, is relatively small, the $5,000, which is basically half of it is land management. It's a lot of smaller expenses. The land management's gone up a little bit because we've had some cost increases for some people who do some of the field mowing there. But the thing so in the end, we're continuing what we're doing in our land management. The issues that I did want to bring up are that part of what we've talked about is, separate from the land management, is sort of, in a sense, improvements in our open space. And at the Barber Reservation, we've been working over this for the last year or so. One thing I just want to highlight, and for David's attention tomorrow, is that we have we're finally implementing a sort of a demonstration forest management program at the Barber Reservation, where some number of acres are going to be managed, some thinning, sort of selective thinning, to sort of create a little more diversity of the forest, hopefully a healthier forest, in the longer term, a little more diversity. And we're doing that with a combination of grants, and basically the revenue from what's being taken will cover the cost. So this is going to be a total cost neutral to the town. Plus, what we're getting out of it is we're getting the forester to clear a lot of the trees and areas around the fields. We're basically reclaiming the stone walls and opening up the fields at the Barber Reservation at no cost, doing this project. The thing that's turned out is that the forester that we love and want to really do the work is suddenly available to start at the end of this week, and we need to end the contract, and they have all the insurance stuff. And it would be wonderful if Kelly can meet with you tomorrow and actually see if we could just sign it, because they are suddenly available and the conditions are ideal to do the work. So that if you could make any time available tomorrow, it would be greatly appreciated, because we could actually move ahead on this thing. Because the fields there's been a lot of work on improving the field conditions there, and it's a scarce resource from an ecological point of view in general for open space, and it's something that's relatively rare in town, and I think people appreciate. So that's why.
And this is consistent with the land management planning that has been taking place?
Yes, exactly. This is all part of that whole plan where we started doing with the Conway School, and that we've been working
Great.
on. And so it has it has multiple benefits. And we've been managing, and this particular forestry effort will basically be at no cost to the town. We'll recover it essentially through what's going to be harvested there. And the other thing I'll bring up is the Barber Barn, the Barber Reservation Barn, that's basically which was falling into some problems with its conditions, but essentially now it's being renovated so that it's a historic building. It's been a little tricky. We have to, on the procedures, of course, gets a little tricky as to getting the building permits at the right time and for lining it up with the people that George Fisk has been instrumental in lining up. Some good contractors, the Bennett School is coming out there they do projects for renovation of historic buildings, and he managed to rope them in somehow.
And that was a historic schoolhouse, right?
No, I think it was a historic. It was I think it was originally a barn of some sort.
Okay.
I mean, it's been a very tricky process that we want it renovated, we want to find uses for it, but it doesn't you don't want to get into doing utilities, and then you want to stop shy of the fact that you have to deal with the American Disabilities Act and making access for all these things, so that it has some very limited uses, but the building will at least be in good condition and certainly look better and have some limited uses for agricultural or other kind of thing related to there, so that it's wonderful. And again, it's taken time and energy, let's say, on the commission and our staff, but there's no cost to the town. George has been founding funding for that, but it's still taking staff resources to make sure it all goes accordingly. So the barber's gotten some significant attention and will get some continued attention. And Bridget's been managing to find grants and other kind of things that basically part of what's been good is her time, having more time for land management stuff, is that she's been actually able to work on proposals, and we've gotten some good grants from from forestry, the state, that have basically paid for a lot of the work that we're doing there.
Great.
So that's why I just want to let you know about that, and just make sure David's available tomorrow. And Kelly will bug you guys in the
And just tell
morning.
me when he's coming in.
Okay.
Thanks, Michael. We
Yes,
appreciate
that's
you
it.
coming in.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any major questions.
No, I
think.
usually write all over these things, but on this one, all I wrote was, "Well done." I read your,
Okay.
your write-ups of your goals and your description and all the things you've been doing, like you just described on the barber with grants and funding and so forth.
Oh, yeah, right. Kelly and
Cost
Bridget
and
have
the
done a lot of great
taxpayer
stuff in the last year or two.
So
Excellent.
that's great.
And I
Keep it
should
up.
tip my hat to the Land Management Task Force, that sort of informal group
Yes.
in the Sherborn Forest and Trail, because they've helped fund
Yeah,
a lot of stuff there.
That's great.
So,
That's awesome.
That's great. Thanks a lot.
okay.
Dealing with a
All right,
great
we're on to the
resource.
next item, which is, we're going to have a discussion of this traffic.
I have to say one more thing. For everybody, there's a Conservation Connections, which is a get-together, a cocktail party on conservation issues, coming up on February 6th at the Sherborn Community Center, that everybody's invited to, and there's going to be a speaker about, there's some professor who's talking about about forests and why, and forests and farmland, past farmland, and how it all was in the past and how it evolved today, so everybody
Is that on the
should-
website, Mike?
What?
Is
It's
that
on the website.
Great.
I'll let
So
you
it's
go
on the
by.
website, February 6th,
We're going to get it out there.
and now we'll talk about...
It'll be more bigger.
Thanks,
Sorry-
Mike.
Sorry to use it for plug time.
Okay. We're going to talk about the traffic safety appointment now?
Sure. On traffic safety, there is a vacancy in this seat, and back in middle of December, we were notified about that, and we scheduled it for that appointment to be done this evening, but we were going to have a discussion about it, giving basically a 7-day public notice and then schedule it for a later meeting. So tonight was just going to be a discussion as opposed to doing the whole appointment.
Okay, yeah, and so one of the things Selectman Durensis has been discussing with the town administrator is the process for advertising appointments, and although there are, I guess in the Selectmen's operating procedures, there are recommendations and guidance in terms of making these positions available to the public on a broad basis and giving people the chance to participate in town government and taking notice of the board's own recommendations, but also looking beyond the board's own recommendations. We don't really have a formal established process by regulation for how these positions are advertised. I know when we appointed the cemetery commissioner a few weeks ago, there was a statutory process because that was an elected board, and so there was a process we needed to follow for that, and it was either followed or not followed to the satisfaction of different people who had read that statute, but in any case, we got through that one. We frequently have occasion not just to appoint boards when terms expire on an annual basis, but also to have to fill boards during interim periods, and although we do have a process for taking volunteer forms and identifying people who might have an interest in serving on particular boards, I don't think we have addressed exactly how the publicity portion of advertising a position should move
Right.
forward. So I had wanted to have a discussion tonight about this position in that respect and give David some guidance. I was hoping we had a full board, but even the two of us, Peter, to give David some guidance on what to do about this position in hopes that it's satisfactory on a consensus basis. And then I think at a later meeting, I would like to have an agenda item that addressed the policy more generally, so we can come up with a checklist of what does the town administrators, what does the Board of Selectmen's office do when a position needs to be filled? How is it publicized, for how long, in what forms? And that way we'll have a consistent process, and hopefully we'll avoid some of this, ad hoc, every single time we have an
Right,
appointment, there's a
right.
question about whether it was properly noticed or advertised.
When there
So-
is no real
Well,
properly
there
defined.
doesn't seem to be, that's right. I think people have different views on that. Do you need something else?
But I was just going to say on that process issue, even though it's for your future, historically, even though it's not a policy formally for the Conservation Commission, we've had a little blurb that we get at least in the newspaper 30 days in advance, as well as we post it downstairs and we put it on the website. But we usually have a little blurb that we get into the newspaper as well,
Okay.
30 days in advance, is what we've historically been doing. That's
Okay,
just
good.
2 cents.
Thanks for that input. So, David, in terms of this traffic safety position that's opened up, and I don't know, Peter, if you have any ideas on what should be done with this?
No, here's the thoughts. I mean, I didn't realize here's this operating
Yeah, the operating
procedures, and
procedures
it's
manual,
been a year since I've really looked at it, but I guess at some point, this was adopted in March. I think, it does try to cover a lot of things, how we do meetings and so
Well,
forth.
March a few years ago.
A few years ago, I'm sorry, yeah, in 2012. And I guess it talks about boards in terms of appointments and so forth. I didn't go back and look at what we have in there, but we did, but the point is that there is something in there that provides us some guidance that I think we can build on in this future meeting. My sentiments are consistent with that, not realizing we had that, which is, this is when you have an appointment opportunity, and it's not to say anything about individuals who have already said, I'm interested, or I want to do it, or committees who have said, I'm interested, I want to do it, as we have in this situation. But at the same time, I think it's important to try and reach out to others, if we can, to bring broader perspectives to a particular committee. And so that's where I got to for this evening's discussion, is that I think we have a candidate, but I think this committee can benefit by a broader perspective, to the extent that there's someone out there that might be interested. So this discussion allows us to make it a little bit more well-known that we have an
Right.
opening, because
Right.
until I looked at the agenda, I didn't realize we had an opening there.
Right, right.
So, and I also didn't realize that we had an opening with an associate member, and then I scratched my head and said, what's an associate? That an associate member has stepped up, has been to the meetings, and wants to take that position, fill that vacancy. And so then I had asked David, what's an associate member, and are we involved in appointment of associate members? And it turns out we do. I mean, different than what you thought. We did appoint this one, I guess, right, Diane? You went back and looked at minutes in August. We
Right.
appointed the associate member, even though I don't know what an
Under what
associate member
auspices.
is. So I think we got to figure out what associate members are and what we think they ought to be doing, or,
Right.
what the expectations are. Because if I were an associate member and I was appointed by the Board of Selectmen, now that I know all of this information,
Right.
I kind of expect that I'd be the lead dog for the position, that
Right.
the next vacancy. And I know it's different than what your experience is with associate members, say, in planning or zoning. I think they're slightly
ZBA and planning
different. Those are
are different, yeah.
different, right? So there's that part of the discussion that I think is important. But anyway, you get to see, I didn't know whether this individual was involved in other stuff. I know, other than fire department, we're not, and I don't want to talk about individuals in particular. It was just that I think we have to figure out, satisfy everybody with the practice and procedures that we follow, and there's confusion over that.
Right.
That I still think the objective of a broader perspective brought to each committee, whether it's this one or others,
Right.
is valuable to the extent we can get that. I think in this one also, because we now have this overarching Public Safety Committee, that their input may be beneficial. Turns out, I guess we do have the input of the committee itself.
Right.
And that's very useful, that's critical. But to the extent the Public Safety Committee can or should be weighing in on this as well, because the Traffic Safety Committee, I think is a very valuable one that could be more impactful to the safety of the town than even they have been in the past. And it doesn't necessarily mean that's by virtue of the makeup of the
Right.
committee members, but it's a broader discussion that this has prompted.
So I don't think public safety would naturally get involved unless it was requested by the selectmen to bring something back to you.
The idea of bringing in another body means you have to wait for that body to meet and make a
Yeah,
recommendation.
and I don't know, I'm curious, what does the overarching Public Safety Committee, which is new for us, and we haven't really seen in action, this is in their wheelhouse, what do they have to say about this?
What you're saying, have the Public Safety Committee review what would be good to bring to the table of traffic safety?
Yeah, I don't know, whatever input that Public Safety Committee can provide would be valuable to know.
I think we need to identify who might be interested in this position first. If there's only one person interested in the
That's right.
position, then it's
That's
not,
right.
and I don't think we're talking about any individual. I don't think your comments were intended to be
Absolutely not.
supportive or not supportive
That's
of any
right.
individual.
No.
And I haven't thought about it in that way either.
Right.
I've been concerned with the process question. And I know, David, in the past, occasionally you have been able to put an ad in one of the local weekly newspapers.
Right.
Or daily newspapers, weekly
That's
newspapers.
a weekly,
Weekly newspapers, and you can do that for free, is that right? There's a no-charge way to do that?
to post, yeah. I mean, when you send something in, if you don't pay for it, you're banking on, hopefully, that they'll print it.
Okay,
But-
because I think it would be a shame to add cost to the budget by
Yeah.
printing something in a weekly paper, which people aren't necessarily going to be looking for an advertisement in a paper when they're thinking about a position. They're reading the articles that our reporter provides, but they're not reading the ads necessarily. And
So we're really talking about like a community public service announcement, free of
Yeah,
charge.
so something that would
Yeah.
be free of charge, I think that makes
Yeah.
Well, I
to
was,
do that here, David, posting on the town's website, posting in, either on the public bulletin board or in some other way, but just to have a process where we can do
Right.
that for this particular appointment.
I'll just read you what Diane and I had come up with
Okay.
today. First, we would require, when there is a vacancy on a board or a committee, require them to come in to meet with the selectmen to announce that there is a vacancy on the committee that they would like to fill.
Which we're doing now by purposes of having this discussion.
Right. And after the board discusses with the chair of that committee, the vacancy would be announced by press release to local paper and Dover Sherborn cable. And then we'd place it on the town's website, post on the bulletin board in the town hall and the library. And we would post it with a deadline for responding to the town using our town form 30 days after that posting.
Right, you didn't have a form in this packet here, right? So.
No, and I
maybe
thought
we'll-
we did. I told you we did in
Yeah,
the
okay.
packets. And then, after that 30 days expires, schedule it to come up in front of the Board of Selectmen to review those applications, invite all those people who have applied in, and you can interview them at that point, and then set the date that you're going to hold the vote. That was just
Yeah.
back of the envelope scratching, so somewhere in there's,
Yeah, just think about how that works, though, particularly, inviting the candidates in or the applicants in to meet with us. There's merit to that, but also think of the practicality of our doing appointments, the annual appointments that come up.
Right.
And how that fits into the
Right.
schedule, and how that will fit
Yeah.
into the schedule with a 5-member board.
right. And I just,
I think it's hard to interview, I actually do think it's hard to interview
Yeah.
candidates we may want for particular boards to do that,
but I'd be comfortable saying that that's not something you need to do on every
Okay.
appointment, because I mean, we do any number of appointments that we don't really need to.
So maybe for just the elected body appointments
It
or
wouldn't be
something
elected
like
body
that?
necessarily, but I mean, for example, if the board decided they wanted to see the candidates for a traffic safety position, that might make sense. At this point, we only have one candidate.
Right.
And, I don't know, they've been recommended by the committee. I don't know if we need to see them, but if other candidates show up, maybe we would want to
Right.
have that discussion. I think getting a resume at least is a helpful.
Right,
And I know
right.
we've done that in the past. 30 days, to me, is fine, and we had input from the Conservation Commission that they do 30 days. But if you think about a vacancy that is then announced at the next Selectmen's meeting that the chair can get to, and then
Right.
you've got a 30-day notice period, and then you have presumably another meeting before you appoint somebody, that's a 60-day
6 to 8 weeks,
process. And for a committee that doesn't have statutory responsibilities, for example, that might not be a big deal. But if you have a permitting body like a Conservation Commission or a Board of Appeals, and they're missing a member and they have trouble
Right,
getting a
right,
quorum,
right.
that could really be an issue. So I would think that, unless there was a particular reason not to do 30 days, you might want to do 30 days, or else we would reduce it to 2 weeks or something. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I think that, it could be a case-by-case basis depending on the urgency, so it's more a guideline in terms of the period, somewhere between 2 weeks and, 30 days makes some sense.
But here today, we were going to discuss just this one position and then get to the general discussion later. I think and I realize we're getting a
Kinda
little bit
going
onto
there.
a general
Yeah.
Right.
level. I'd rather have that discussion when we have a full
Okay.
board president if possible. But with this traffic safety, what are you proposing to do, David, for this particular position?
Well, what I had told Brad Van Brunt, the chair, is that we would likely be discussing the idea of it tonight and consider this a public announcement of the vacancy and schedule it for January 15th.
Well, what about, I thought we were going to try to advertise to see if there were others who were interested. I mean, have you done that yet? Has an ad run, or have you posted any?
No, we haven't done like a press release to the
I'd be
paper or
comfortable
anything.
putting it on for later in the month. I don't think there's
Okay.
any great urgency with having a full traffic safety committee, particularly where this, proposed appointee is already an
Is already
associate
there,
member, so
right,
they're already
right.
getting the benefit of that person's contribution. And I think just from the standpoint of process, since the concerns have been raised about not opening positions up to enough people, I disagree that we don't open them up to people, because I think we have,
Right.
it's like pulling teeth sometimes to get volunteers in here.
Well, I will say that this board, compared to the year before, you've done 60 or 70 appointments since June. You've filled a lot of seats. And there are a lot of new names in there, too.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So, David, I guess what I would say is, can we put this on for a vote on the 29th or whatever the end of the month, sometime near the end of the month?
Okay.
Or early in February. Can we run this notice or press release that you talked about?
Right.
Hopefully, the paper will pick it up.
Yeah, that gives us time because,
And you can post for, a couple of weeks and ask
Right.
people to have their, say a week ahead of the meeting when we want to do the appointment, ask people to apply by then,
yeah.
okay?
Yeah, so if we didn't, that's what I was afraid of. We wouldn't be able to get that in the weekly paper to do it on the 15th. But now, with that date, we
I don't see
can.
this as a crisis, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Okay. Yeah, so, but I did want to say that I don't think we violated any of those policies that had been set in place, but
Those policies
Yeah,
are so
it's-
general that they don't
it's hard
give
to
you any
violate.
guidance, and that's what I'm
Right,
trying to come
right,
up with now, is
exactly.
what's the guidance? I think the
Right.
board, a few years ago, did a great job of,
Putting it down.
making it a public process, or expressing that it should be a public process. But
Right.
what hasn't been done is any specific guidance, and I would
Right.
say that that's the case, just based on the exchanges we've had
Right.
on this board about what different people think the requirements are.
Right,
So-
right. Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's do that.
Okay.
Is that-
That's fine, that's great.
Okay,
Yep,
good.
that's great.
What's the next piece of business? I guess it's Selectmen reports. Anything, Mr. Caruso? No. Okay. Set the next meeting for Thursday, January 15th, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and we have no minutes to approve? We have no warrant to approve?
have no executive session.
And we have no executive session, so...
Can I just
You
mention?
got a town
We get the
administrator
NOI
report?
thing,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to mention that this is an updated
Yeah,
checklist.
yeah.
This adds the citizen petition as the last two articles that came in regarding a proposed development for 59 North Main Street. And I have copies of that petition for you.
Oh, good.
That's great.
So some night later, when you're reviewing warrant articles, they could come in and actually,
That'd be great,
talk about
and that
that.
was an effort that, you were instrumental, and Gino was instrumental, and we had discussions.
This is what we
It was,
just discussed last.
Yes, it is.
Just recently,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and David did
Right.
yeoman's work
So we
working
got
with the
us
citizens
folks to do a
group to get a
citizens
warrant
petition.
petition, yes.
Okay, good.
yeah, it worked out well, so. And then a personnel staffing update, I was just going to say that I mentioned last time about the response that we had for the town accountant's position. Our current town accountant, our most recent town accountant's last day was this past Friday. And, I've narrowed down the selection to one person, and that person has accepted an offer. So we're working on getting her in, hopefully by the end of the month, or at least beginning of February.
That's great. In the meantime, how are you covered?
Deb Seifring has stepped up as acting in an interim town accountant capacity. Her backup for accounting tasks is the CPA firm in, I don't know where they are. It's Kinsurf, is Eric
Oh,
Kinsurf.
so Sandwich, that guy.
Right, he was kind of a software expert in this software. We also have out in the wings the people that we had used to fill in that did the treasurer's report on that office. And we believe that Deb can hold the duties for a few weeks. We've talked to Mary Wolf of Advisory. The model will get updated, everything will move along, and I don't see any bumps
And
right
again,
in the
this
road coming.
no longer candidate, but the person that's going to come on board the end of the month was the top choice from sitting in also with Fred from, Fred Abdelhad from the Personnel Committee. And
That
Mary
advisory
said-
panel was Mary Wolf as the, as a general citizen, because
Yes.
she can't really serve on any other
Understood.
committee. And Fred Abdelhad, who's the chair of the Personnel Board,
And you-
and the CPA, and myself, and we were all unanimous with who was the top choice of
And you're
those
the one.
interviews, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so, David, you've given us this list of checklists, and I guess we're not going to go through these one by...
No, it
by
just,
one.
what I noted was the comments from the last time that we had this. So, like, if you looked at number 11, establish general bylaw regarding beavers, it's just a note in there that I still need to get it to Board of Health and Concom to review and draft the Sherborn version. It's just an update on the progress that,
And you had two of these which don't have a sponsor. One of them is the zoning relief to allow commercial kennel, and one is to copy the state law for commercial kennel licensing into the local bylaw. And I think on the second one, we decided, I think, at least in a general sense on this board, I thought we decided that it did make sense to incorporate the state law because it allowed us to, administer fines or something? Wasn't there some kind of a connection between what the town could do? But I also think
Yeah.
there was not support for a zoning bylaw the last time we talked about it.
right.
Is that your
Yeah,
recollection?
and I think the key is who's the proponent there, so.
And there isn't one, and if it's
Yeah.
not the selectmen and it's not the planning
It's
board.
not coming, yeah, right.
Okay.
So I could dispose of that, the zoning change one?
If we don't have a proponent
There's no
for that,
right.
I don't see
What,
why not.
what was that, something that Paul was discussing? He
I
seemed
thought
to
he-
be talking
I thought he
about
was
that.
against, I thought he was against that, was he not?
I did
That's where
too,
it came
but
from.
but
I don't
let's,
know where it
why don't we
came
leave it on until
We're
he
concluding.
can weigh in
Yeah, yeah.
on that? But I don't want to speak of whether he was for or against, but I know he was deeply involved in the issue when it came up. He had advised me on the commercial kennel law, and that's when I met with Walter and had talked to Mr. Bender and.
If you remember, the commercial kennel law is not a zoning law. There's also
Right.
our zoning requirements. So
Yeah.
somebody who wanted a kennel in town, and this is to Mr. Bender point previously, they not only would need to comply with our zoning bylaw, but they also would have to comply with state law with respect to how kennels are managed. And so, and I think the kennel, if I'm not mistaken, I think the kennel law has broader application than just a commercial kennel, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, it defines a commercial kennel and the,
So if somebody had a
Non-commercial.
farm that had a kennel operation as part of the farm, but it wasn't a commercial operation, I think they're still subject to getting kennel licensing the way we have stable licensing, is that right?
right. And there's, we had, I think what the confusion in this case was is that they came in and they received a business registration that comes from the clerk's office, thinking that they had received the licensing that is referred to in the statute.
Okay.
So,
All right, so we'll leave it on the list for now, and we'll have that discussion when the full board is present.
okay.
All right, good. We have
So
any other
that's all I
business?
had.
No?
Great.
Motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Okay,
job.
great, we're adjourned.
Good job, good job, good job, good job, Mike.